Okay, let's kick this off. Hello, everybody. My name is Jamie Erickson. I'm with Altimetrik, and I've got a couple of esteemed colleagues from Swantide here to talk about a couple new emerging topics related to the vast discussion on technical debt. So we're here to provide you a quick overview on some key points, as well as to go through a product demo on some next-gen AI-related technologies to help with technical debt. And so let's get on into the beginning, shall we? So the three of us, my name is Jamie Erickson. I am a senior client partner at Altimetrik. I have been in and around the ecosystem for about 20 years, both being as a customer as well as a employee at Salesforce, and then now on into the world of being a solution provider for Salesforce customers. Taylor, go ahead, if you don't mind.
Yeah, awesome. Great to see everyone today. Thank you for making time. I'm Taylor Lint. I'm the founder and CEO of Swantide. Excited to show you more about our platform and how we lower the cost of Salesforce ownership. My background's in software engineering. So I started Swantide about 4 years ago now to tackle this problem of the high cost and time of implementations and ongoing management. My background's in software engineering. So prior to starting Swantide, I built products at LinkedIn and Alphabet that were automating large professional services industries with machine learning. So different verticals, but same product problem that we're solving now with Swantide.
Thanks, Taylor. Hey, everybody. Mike Milburn here. I was one of the early guys at Salesforce, and during that time frame, we brought you the Service Cloud. So thanks to so many of you that I recognize from those days. And now join Taylor and Swantide to tackle the next part of SaaS and the next part of Salesforce, which Jamie and the Altimetrik team are leading, which is let's make it easier and faster for you guys.
Great. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Taylor. So covering the agenda real quick, we'll hope to be brief and get into the demo, but before we'd like to talk a little about our company overviews respectively, as well as just kind of bring everybody back to the main topic, which is technical debt, kind of what it is, what it means, and to your growth. Also, then we'll start to talk a little bit more about a demo. Taylor will show us the core Swantide product and a couple of really killer demo use cases that we're using at Altimetrik. And then last, we'll go into how we can use this great technology and partnership to grow with you, and then talk about next steps. Sound good? Let's get into it. So Altimetrik, company I work for, has been in the ecosystem for about 14 years. We have been doing a lot of implementation support and core engineering product work for a lot of companies across fintech, CPG retail, banking, healthcare, and then payment space, specifically within fintech, as well as with auto manufacturing and technology. We have a workforce of more than 6,000 practitioners globally. Within the Salesforce space, we are proud to have more than 960 certifications, 80 of which are Data Cloud forward, and 150 Einstein AI, which are two emerging products that I think most of us are interested to learn more about. In addition to that, we've got several different engineering centers across North America, Latin America, Europe, and Asia Pacific to help serve the global demand for problems with Salesforce. Okay, a little bit more about our Salesforce practice specifically. We do things like consulting. We focus a lot of time on data and integration, making sure with those offers that your org is running well, that you have the right reporting and everything makes sense, and also is well integrated with back office third-party tools. We do have a lot of focus on analytics and AI regarding Tableau and CRM analytics and such, as well as having a robust offer of managed services having to do with configuration, APIs, integration, test automation, and DevOps, both of which are core to Altimetrik from a delivery and a corporate engineering perspective. We've had a lot of very successful engagements with global clientele, as you can see from the logos on the slide. We also boast implementation and experience across all of the core Salesforce product clouds, as well as the most emerging within Data Cloud and Agentforce, both of which we're partnered with Salesforce on today. As I mentioned, we have a lot of practitioners. We have 500 specifically in the Salesforce space. We have a lot of credentials, a lot of certs, but we also, most importantly, have a pretty high CSAT score, which indicates to me that our customers and people we work with are very appreciative and believe that our work is of the highest quality. Okay, in terms of partnerships, we pride ourselves in working with the best. Taylor and Mike are a good representation of that, but in addition, we have a pretty significant human-centered focus, and we like to do design and innovation. So all of our focus is around what makes the customer's priorities come to light, and what also creates innovation for them so they can compete and win in the marketplace globally.
So let's introduce Swantide. So think about what you were doing 4 years ago. What Taylor was doing 4 years ago is founding a company that you see the mission statement up top, which is the first purpose-built AI-powered solution that reduces the cost of implementations and ownership of Salesforce. Pretty incredible. We're headquartered in San Francisco and Austin, and we serve companies, SIs, and ISVs. Our product suite consists of two things that you're going to see it in demo in just a few minutes. On the left-hand side, you see a powerful workflow library that allows you to package up implementations and deliver those in hours, not weeks or months. And then on the right-hand side, you see our AI documentation and AI assistant suite. This gives every company, regardless of if you're an old customer on Salesforce or a new customer on Salesforce, you have a fully documented Salesforce org and a powerful way to interact with that org, which is the AI assistant.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Thanks, Taylor. So back to, I guess, to brass tacks. We're here because customers, large, small, foreign, domestic, all have technical debt. Technical debt is something that accrues over time as a choice of decisions that you make within your organizations. The first reason people get technical debt, and this is in no order of importance, but rapid growth. Oftentimes, rapid growth puts a lot of emphasis on time to market. Unfortunately, at the expense of time to clean up, we'll call it. So there's really a big focus on, or lack of focus rather, on technical debt because of just rapid growth. The second thing that we see is working with hundreds of customers in my Salesforce days is that they're generally speaking at the crux of the matter is that there's a core weakness in governance. So architectural oversight, documentation, and adherence to best practices are commonplace in many orgs that are struggling to become performant. And what makes it more difficult is when you inherit an org that isn't documented, it makes it really, really difficult to make a lot of progress and get the customer where they need to be. The third is excessive customization. So over time, the product has effectively taken products that you build yourself and they built them as part of the product and embedded them in the product. So there's really a kind of a backlog of custom code as Salesforce moves the platform from a programmatic to a declarative kind of mode when that shift happens. M&A is also a very, very big thing that we see a lot, even in Altimetrik today, where customers come to us and ask, Jamie, we've got this integration across a couple different businesses. We got different sales and service teams wanting to do things their way. How do you make that work? How can we best position and rationalize new mergers, right? That's a very, very important, and also increasingly, it's increasing in terms of the demand we're getting there. Then last, finally, kind of relates to the first, is just neglecting maintenance. That could be just making decisions around, deprioritizing staffing, not really having the right skills, not having an architect, not understanding how to do maintenance, still using change sets, things like that are sort of a legacy. So with all of those problems and how we got here, here's a couple perspectives that I have and I'd like to share about how and why you should address it. First of all, system performance. Your users out there will come to you and say, I'm not really happy with Salesforce. You don't know why. And it could be a lot of those decisions earlier that you make that impact their user performance and the value from Salesforce. So the key thing is to try to identify them and quickly resolve them, right? Those performance gaps. Another thing is user experience. A lot of workflows, a lot of automation technologies, a lot of cross-system integrations, legacy platforms, they all get in the way of the user experience. And we all know as working with customers, user experience is kind of important and it's kind of key in terms of customers being happy and getting what they need from the platform. The third is a cost efficiency. So you really want to start to look at your maintenance costs and start thinking about including more maintenance work within your payload, your deployments, so that you can become more cost effective, and over time chip away at that expensive rework that will build over time as the technical debt accrues. Business agility, when you know what your org's doing and it's well maintained and it's well architected, you can move a lot faster. We all know that. And so key for all of us is to try to enable our customers to do more faster. And so we'll talk about that in a little bit, but that's one of the key thrusts of the new world forward in terms of SIs and tools in the Salesforce space. And then last, but certainly not least, and probably should have been the top of the slide, is compliance and security. If your org's poorly documented and you're not sure what's going on and you don't know who's worked on it last or who knows what, good chance you're going to probably also avoid inherit security risks just by not knowing what to do and not knowing how to address them. So it's key for all of us to be thinking about security and threat vulnerability assessments from that mindset as well. So overall, I'll leave you with this. We all have the same problem. Most of us, if not all of us, have technical debt. We all know that. And here are some key reasons we should all be thinking about in terms of front of mind on how to address and why to address.
Thanks, Jamie. So, Jamie highlighted all of these areas that are concerns, why we need to address them. The how you do that, it can take a lot of time. So starting any of these projects, the first piece before you can even plan out the change that you're going to make is understanding what's in your current system. So Swantide helps with both documentation as well as impact analysis. So you can scope projects, you can understand, a non-technical person can jump into the product and understand what's actually built without having to look at code and try to triage it and understand what's actually happening. And so after you understand a system and then you start planning out what are the changes we're going to make, and that requires you to go through an implementation and scoping phase as well. And so Swantide can help with building out changes, with UAT documentation. It can help with product enablement as you roll out the changes. And then finally, once you're live and you have end users, coming to the Salesforce owners with questions or issues, AI can also help with first line ticket defense and automating either answers or resolutions to those problems. And so we'll jump into the product here in a second and actually show you guys how you can leverage Swantide in some of these use cases. So I'm going to share my screen here in a second, and we'll look at three different parts of the product. We're going to first look at how you can use documentation to do scoping faster and without having to rely on as technical resources to do that initial upfront work. Then we're going to look at how you can leverage Swantide's AI assistant to actually understand something in your org and make changes to it. And then finally, we're going to look at how you can quickly, in a matter of clicks, deploy Agentforce into your newly cleaned up Salesforce instance. Okay. So what you all should be seeing now is the Swantide data dictionary. So when you connect Swantide to your org, it's a single click. So you click one button, and the next day you're going to be able to come into Swantide and see documentation as well as a data dictionary for everything that's been built in your org. So there's virtually no setup, and we're able to then generate this representation of your Salesforce instance for you to look at and browse through, and it powers our AI assistant as well. So if I was going to update maybe stage names, opportunity.stagename in my Salesforce org, and there could be a couple of reasons I want to do that. One is M&A, like Jamie mentioned. Maybe you have a company that you just bought and you're wanting to merge their process into the other company's process. You need to understand what's built in both around their current sales process. It could also be that you're adding a new product line and you want to update it, or you're changing the structure of your sales org. Any of those could require you to go in and change this. And so to understand first how big of a project this would be, how much time is it going to take, you need to understand everywhere that opportunity.stagename is used. So what I'm looking at in Swantide is that field. You can look up any piece of metadata, and I can now go look at how many references there are in this instance. So opportunity.stagename, I can see there's 431. I'm going to filter to the flows that touch this, the automations that touch this field, because this is where a lot of the complexity might end up living for this project. And so I can see down here that there's 41 flows. And what I typically do is I open these in a new tab and start to look at them. But I have a lot of it handy right here too. I can see where is this field used, so I can see how many times it's used in a particular flow. And if I click into one of these, I can now see a description of what is this automation doing? What's this flow doing? And this is really where the time saving comes in, because if I was scoping this project and I wasn't technical, I would have to bring in a technical resource once I got this list of 40 flows and ask them to open up this flow, click through every node. There could be 2 or there could be 40, and then write down what is this actually doing, then take it back to the business team and say, okay, here's what this process is. It's going to be impacted by the change to the stage name. What do you guys want to do? Do we want to keep it as is? How do we want to filter in this new criteria? That process would need to happen for every single one of those 41 flows. And I'd have to bring in a technical resource. With Swantide, I can skip that step of bringing in a technical resource to create the documentation, because the business context and the implementation details have been generated for me completely from AI, and they're kept up to date. So if someone changes something, I can always go in and see in Swantide what's actually live in my instance. I can see the references for this as well. So this is one use case for scoping work, impact analysis, writing documentation that Swantide can save tons of time off of a project. Instead of spending, we've seen partners that used to have a 6-month discovery process, and they're actually able to cut that down by 2/3 to a 2-month discovery process by leveraging Swantide's automated documentation and data dictionary. So that's huge time savings. And now that doesn't even, take into account the fact that now the change you wanted to make for your business can go live faster. So the next part of the product I want to show you all is our AI assistant. So this AI assistant is powered by, it's personalized to your Salesforce org, and it's powered by that documentation and the metadata that's in your system. And so when you connect Swantide, in addition to generating the documentation, we generate this personalized AI assistant. And there's hundreds of different use cases. What I'm going to show you guys now is if I was a developer working in this org, and maybe I was working on something new that needed to send emails. I want to ask if there's any utils in our Apex classes for sending emails that I could leverage, so that I'm not duplicating any work or doing something that I don't have to do. Which the alternative, if I didn't have Swantide, would be for me to go and dig through all of the code or rely on documentation that might be out of date. It might be, maybe 2 of these existed and it didn't have the other one. Now in 30 seconds, I can see, okay, there's this send better email util. I'm interested in learning more about this. So I just asked Swantide, can you tell me more about this class, send better email util? And it's going to give me this nice description of everything it does. It handles addresses and template handling, attachment management, and has some error handling. And maybe I open this up in Salesforce and I realize, okay, this is really long. Like, this is really hard for me to read as a developer. I actually want to spend some time rewriting this, because for the functionality, it shouldn't be 280 lines of code. So then I can ask Swantide, can you help me rewrite this and make it more efficient, but follow best practices and not lose any functionality. So now I'm going to go from, working on this project I had for writing a new class. I'm going to clean up some tech debt, and then I'm going to be able to leverage that in my new project that I'm working on. So this is just one use case for the AI assistant. Some other ways that you can use this are for writing user stories. You can use it to write user acceptance testing scripts. You can use it to write end user enablement documentation. You can also use it to write out technical design docs and things like that. So there's a ton of functionality. And again, it's personalized to your org. So it allows for reverse searching or describing a problem and actually being able to see it. Here we have an example of the rewritten class. Okay, so the final thing I'm going to show you all is how you can actually deploy Agentforce into your org. So the Swantide platform, in addition to having the AI documentation and the AI assistant, has the ability for the Swantide team, as well as partners and ISVs, to bundle up metadata and turn them into reusable assets really quickly. So what this means is they can build something and then in a matter of minutes, make that a reusable asset that anyone at their organization and just their organization can use again. So in this case, I'm going to look at this Swantide. We call these workflows. I'm going to look at this Swantide workflow called Deploy Service Agent. I can see in here that it's going to create a Gen AI planner and it's going to create a bot. And if I were to deploy this workflow, I can actually give it a name like my new agent. I can write in the description. I could put in a tone. And if I were to deploy this, it would actually put new metadata into my org in a matter of minutes. And so this is a way that our customers have been doing Agentforce implementations super quickly. And then you can go in, you can add topics to these agents and do this, you know, instead of it taking a couple of hours, it's something that the time that an SI or the Swantide team spends getting an agent really great and production ready, they can then bundle that up and make it ready for any of their customers to use. So Jamie, I'll turn it back over to you now. That's what we have for the demo.
Perfect. Thank you, Taylor. Just give me a second to get back over into the presentation. And we should be good to go. Okay. Should I have the presentation up?
Not yet.
There we go. Share button. Sorry about that. Okay, so Taylor, again, thank you for walking us through that demo. Really exciting stuff. So I just wanted to recap for everybody kind of just what you just saw. So first, as we talked about, the problems really came around documentation and all the different hands that may have been in your org or your config. And it's just really hard over time to get a hands on that. And I think what we saw was a really clever way using technology to document the org, understand what it's doing, understand how it's defined, understand, you know, all the different components and what they mean, how they relate to each other. The second piece we saw, which I thought was really cool, is the ability to kind of do that impact analysis, looking at the processes using AI, and then being able to understand, well, what is the impact of the change, right? And I think that's sometimes something that we look at as practitioners as being, you know, a lengthy process with a lot of trade-offs, and sometimes it's incomplete. And even if you look at it with the best of intentions, you might miss some things, right? And it might compromise the entire effort. And then the third thing that I really, really liked was the fact that it no longer takes, you know, the amount of time it used to deploy either simple things or really cool, meaningful functionality that you might want to either demo quickly or put into production quickly, or, you know, accelerate your time to get to market with a new product or a new feature or a new capability. It literally, when we work together with some customers, it is just as simple as clicking and there you have it. It shows up, right? And we're seeing a lot of really, really good, you know, time improvements from our deployments. And I think there's a lot to look forward to in terms of you using Swantide. So I'm really super happy about that. And every time I see this never gets old, because it's something that I've dealt with for 20 years and have had to deal with it. Now there's a new way of dealing with it. And I really applaud Swantide for being able to really move the needle here. So I want to make sure we had a point to call that out. Okay, in terms of next steps, I think we're at the conclusion of our presentation and demo, and hopefully we've been able to keep your interest level up. So we're going to pivot now to some questions and some next steps. If there's anything from the gallery we'd like to field for you. Let me check for any questions. Yeah, one came in. Taylor, how does this relate to production or sandbox environments? Can you describe kind of how that fits into the current method?
Yeah, most of our customers have it connected to both production and a sandbox. It depends on the use case. Some might just have one or the other, but you can connect Swantide to both, and then you can toggle between orgs. And so you can talk to your sandbox environment, or you can talk to your production environment.
Great, great. Let me think here. We got a couple more. I'm trying to find a broader section. What are some of the time efficiencies or savings that you're starting to see with this technology? Can you give an example?
Yeah, I think the one example that I mentioned of, we had a partner who had a 6-month discovery process when they would go in and they would assess orgs for big implementation changes or updates, and they had about 100 questions that they would have to send in a technical resource to ask. And with Swantide, right off the bat, they were able to automate over 30% of those questions and get those answers instantly. And then another 30% of those, they were able to leverage Swantide to what we call gather evidence, and then have a human make judgment on, is this done in a good way or a bad way? Is this something we want to make a change or not? But that's really significant time savings. We also have we have a customer right now who's using it for M&A, and they are under a really tight timeline. And they're feeling really confident about being able to get that migration done without having to pay for another year of a second instance. We have individual admins at organizations that are saving up to 40 hours a month per admin. So that's a ton of time back, right? Especially for small businesses. And then it just compounds the bigger the org.
One thing I would like to add, team, is Taylor just mentioned that across the board, it's call it net 30%. There's also, and we've all worked Saturday night for an emergency, right? Something happens in production and the team is scrambling to try and figure it out. And you need a tool on that Saturday night. That's one thing that we're hearing from CIOs, which is everyone's trying to rationalize and be more human. And so with tools like Swantide, they're now able to eliminate the lengthy time spent over the weekends figuring out what happened. And so I think that's also worth adding to that question.
Wow, 30%. Pretty exciting. Other question. Since this is new, how does it, back to environments, Taylor, how does it relate when you're making changes to kind of like the traditional sandbox deployments, where you have to do your testing, integration testing, and then you promote into production? So how does what you showed here, which looks very great, by the way, how does it work with the existing kind of environment setup that most customers have?
Yeah, great question. So a lot of our customers are still using the same deployment process that they had before, but it just differs in a couple of ways. So one is if they're using workflows to deploy functionality, workflows are built and tested by someone at their organization. They're a template that's created from code or automations or validation rules or custom objects that a human designed and built and tested. And so they're great as reusable assets because there's a high degree of confidence that it's been tested by your team already. So we do see some partners leveraging workflows and deploying them straight into, if they have a building environment and then they have a testing environment, sometimes they deploy those right into the testing environment and just run them through UAT, since they've already tested them as reusable assets before leveraging them. If folks are writing Apex or, writing validation rules or using Swantide to write a technical design doc, then we see them still building wherever they've traditionally built.
Excellent. Let me see. We've got one more question. Back to Agentforce. Can you help describe how, can you help describe how to build Agentforce workflows? Because there's a few,
Yeah.
I'm going to guess I'm going to add something. There's a few on the screen, which implies a library. Can you help? I guess this is about how do we build out our own? How do we leverage what you have out of the box, etc.?
Yeah. So we see Agentforce as a great candidate for Swantide workflows and reusable assets for a couple of reasons. So what we're seeing folks do is generally design one workflow that's deploying the agent, and then additional workflows that are topics and have corresponding actions as part of them. Or the actions can also be their own topics. And as you saw when we were deploying that workflow or running through that flow, you can customize it at time of deployment to the customer's environment. So something like actions or topics for Agentforce, there is probably a lot of similarity in how someone might want to do order management from a process perspective, but where it differs is the custom fields that they have in their org. Or if you think about how do you authenticate who the person is that's, asking to update their order, some companies might want to use an email address, some might want to use an order ID and an email address. Those kind of customizations are all things that you can have inputs in Swantide when you deploy the topic into the environment. And so we've seen folks, we have a partner right now who's going to deliver 11 agents this month, leveraging Swantide for the agent and several of the topics in each of those customer orgs.
Great. Okay. So in terms of next steps, we have a QR code here that should have some contact information in terms of how to get a hold of us. But the three of us, I think, have pretty strong presence on LinkedIn. So Taylor at swantide.com, is it correctly? And then Mike, your email, just want to spell it out for people real quick.
Super easy, Jamie. Mike at swantide.com and Taylor at swantide.com. That's where you'll find us.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike and Taylor. And then I'm Jay Erickson at altimetrik.com as well, for those that want to write it down and might not get the QR code to work. So again, we wanted to just kind of bring this to a conclusion, talk about cool things, great topics, relevant topics that are in the ecosystem today. And we're very happy that everybody has had the time to join. We appreciate your presence. We know time is one of the most important things we have, so thank you for sharing that with us. And if you have any questions at all, just feel free to contact all or one of us as appropriate, and we'll be there to support your questions and help you get to where you need to be. And appreciate all of you for your effort and joining us in this journey. So thanks for now, and we'll talk soon.